The first time I drove through the iron gates of Crestwood Estates, I felt like I had made the right decision. The streets were lined with massive oak trees, the houses were built like miniature mansions, and everything looked pristine. It was the kind of place where people paid a premium just to say they lived there. That didn't matter much to me, though. I wasn't here for status. I just wanted a peaceful place to call home. I had barely finished unpacking when I noticed her. Margaret, middle-aged, stiff posture, designer blouse too tight around the arms. She stood across the street, arms crossed, watching my every move like a hawk guarding its nest. I gave her a polite nod, even raised a hand in greeting. She didn't wave back. Her expression never changed. Maybe she just needed time. Maybe she was skeptical of new people in general. But as the days passed, it became clear. She wasn't just skeptical. She was hostile. It started small. A cold stare whenever I drove by. A fake smile when I checked my mail, like she was forcing herself to be civil. Then came the whispers. I caught bits of conversation when she chatted with other neighbors on their manicured lawns. Strange choice for a homeowner here, she muttered once, just loud enough for me to hear. Another time, not sure how he managed to get approved. It wasn't hard to read between the lines. She had a problem with me. Not my car, not my house me. Still, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was just one of those overly involved HOA type, the kind who thought they were running a gated kingdom. But I had no intention of bending to unnecessary rules or jumping through hoops just to keep her happy. This was my home now, and I wasn't going to let some bitter woman make me feel otherwise. What I didn't know was that Margaret wasn't the type to settle for dirty looks and whispers. She was about to make it very clear that she saw me as a problem, and she intended to solve it. I should have known something was off when I stepped outside that morning and saw Margaret standing at the end of my driveway, arms crossed, smirking. But I didn't notice her at first. I was too focused on what was in front of me. Orange construction barrels, 6 of them lined up neatly across my driveway, like a blockade. For a moment I just stood there, blinking, trying to process what I was looking at. I hadn't ordered construction. I hadn't requested repairs. So why was my driveway suddenly blocked like a closed-off highway lane? Margaret didn't keep me waiting long for an answer. Just a new policy we're testing out, she said sweetly when I walked over. I raised an eyebrow. A policy for what? HOA safety measures. She gestured vaguely toward the barrels, like they spoke for themselves. We're working on keeping the neighborhood up to its high standard. You understand. I didn't. So these are here for safety? I asked slowly. Yes, she said. To prevent certain issues. What issues? She just smiled, like she was enjoying a private joke. It was all nonsense, of course. The barrels weren't for safety. They weren't for anything except one purpose, making my life harder. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. All right. Well, if this is an HOI rule, I'll need to see it in writing. Otherwise, I'll have them removed. Her smile faltered for a split second. Then she plastered it back on. Oh, Ethan, you must be new to how we do things here. HOA decisions don't always have to be written down right away. We have discretion. Discretion. Meaning she had discretion. I was still trying to process the absurdity of it when I noticed something even worse. A truck pulled up to the side of my property. 2 men in work vests got out carrying thick metal poles and wires. What now? I muttered. Margaret followed my gaze, still smirking. Oh, just a minor addition. Since you're new, we thought an extra layer of security might be helpful. She wasn't serious. She couldn't be. I walked over to the workers. Hey, what are you installing? One of them glanced at me, then at Margaret, then quickly looked away. Just following HOA orders, sir. Orders for what? Then I saw the blueprint one of them had placed on the ground. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. An electric fence. Not around the neighborhood. Not around multiple homes. Just one. Mine. That was when I stopped giving Margaret the benefit of the doubt. This wasn't about policies. It wasn't about safety. It wasn't even about control anymore. This was personal. And she had no idea who she was messing with. I had given Margaret every chance to stop. I had tried reasoning, tried getting her to explain herself in a way that made even the slightest bit of sense. But every conversation ended the same way. Her smug smile, her dismissive tone, her veiled insults. Some homeowners just don't fit here, you know, she mused one afternoon, standing in the middle of my driveway like she owned the place. I clenched my jaw, keeping my expression neutral. Fit how exactly? Oh, Ethan, she laughed, waving a hand. No need to be sensitive. The HOA just has a vision for this community, a certain standard to uphold. She said it loud enough for the other neighbors to hear. A few of them pretended to check their mail, acting like they weren't listening. I stared at her for a long moment. I had dealt with people like her before, the kind who hid their prejudice behind rules and regulations, smiling while they tightened the screws. But what made Margaret dangerous wasn't just her pettiness. It was the fact that she had power. She had control over the HOA budget, and she was using every dollar to make my life hell. First the barrels, then the electric fence, and just when I thought she couldn't go any further, a metal gate appeared at the entrance of my driveway. I stood there, blinking at the ridiculous structure. Black iron bars, a cheap keypad bolted to the side. It looked like something you'd see in front of a private estate, except this one wasn't for security. It was for keeping me out of my own home. To top it off, she planted a "no entry" sign right next to it, on my property. That was it. I was done. I stormed across the street, but before I even reached her porch, she was already stepping outside, acting like she'd been expecting me. "Margaret," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Remove the gate." She crossed her arms. "Oh, Ethan, you really need to learn how things work around here." "This isn't how things work," I snapped. "This is harassment." She gasped, hand to her chest like I had just insulted her family. "Harassment? No, no, no. It's just policy." I exhaled sharply. "Then I'll take legal action." She laughed. A full, genuine laugh. "Go ahead," she said. "The HOA owns this neighborhood." She turned and walked back inside, slamming the door behind her. That was her final mistake, because I wasn't bluffing, and soon she'd learn exactly who really owned this neighborhood. HOA meetings were usually held in the community clubhouse, a grand building with chandeliers and marble floors, the kind of place where people like Margaret felt powerful. That night it was packed. Homeowners filled the chairs, murmuring about new policies and upcoming rule changes. At the front of the room, Margaret sat at a long table with the other HOA board members, looking as smug as ever. Then I walked in. The room went quiet. Eyes followed me as I made my way to the front. Margaret's smile twitched slightly, but she masked it well. "Ethan," she said smoothly, "this is an HOA board meeting. Homeowners aren't allowed to just." I dropped a thick folder onto the table. "I have a few things to go over first." She scoffed. "Unless you're here to file a complaint. I'm here to make an announcement." I paused, letting the tension build. Then I said it. "I own the neighborhood." The room went completely still. Margaret blinked. "Excuse me." "I own the neighborhood." The room went completely still. Margaret blinked. "Excuse me." I tapped the folder. "Every house. Every plot of land. I bought them under a holding company over the last few years. Which means," I leaned forward, "I have final say on everything, including this HOA." Her face drained of color. A few board members started whispering. One of them flipped through the folder, his eyes widening as he saw the paperwork. Official deeds, property records, all with my name on them. Margaret forced a laugh. "Oh, Ethan, come on." I was joking. "You know how HOA rules can be a little extreme." I smiled. Joking. That electric fence seemed real enough. She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned to the other board members. "Well, I suppose we could revisit some of our policies." "Oh, we will," I said, starting with a new HOA president. The crowd murmured. A few people nodded. Some even clapped. Juliana shot up from her seat. "You can't just—" "I can," I interrupted. And I just did. For the first time since I'd met her, she didn't have a response. The reign of Juliana was over, and now it was my turn to set the rules. The moment the truth came out, the tide shifted. The same neighbors who once watched in silence as Margaret ran the HOA like a personal dictatorship suddenly found their voices. They were furious, not just at her abuse of power, but at how she had been using their money to fund her petty war against me. So I called for an emergency HOA vote. The turnout was massive. Homeowners who never showed up for meetings before packed into the clubhouse, their eyes blazing with anger. Margaret sat at the front, trying to maintain her usual smug expression, but the cracks were showing. "This is outrageous," she muttered. "You can't just vote me out because of one misunderstanding." I cleared my throat. "A misunderstanding? Margaret, you used HOA funds to install a metal gate in front of my house." Murmurs spread through the crowd. "And the barrels," someone else added. "The electric fence," another neighbor yelled. Her face twitched. It was all for community safety." That's when I pulled out the next bombshell. "The audit says otherwise." I dropped another folder on the table. The HLA board members scrambled to look through it, and as soon as they did, their faces darkened. Margaret had been misusing funds for years, paying herself bonuses from HLA fees, billing personal expenses under fake maintenance costs, even using the budget for things like spa treatments and luxury getaways. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone in the back cursed under their breath. One of the board members stood up. I motioned for immediate removal of Margaret as HOA president. I seconded that, another board member said, not even looking at her. A vote was cast. It wasn't even close. Margaret was unanimously voted out. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Her face had gone completely pale, her fingers gripping the table like she could hold onto her power if she just clenched hard enough. But it was over, and that was only the beginning of her downfall. With the audit findings now public, Margaret was slapped with massive fines, tens of thousands of dollars. The HOA board wasted no time in demanding she pay back every cent she had stolen. But there was just one problem. She couldn't afford it. She had no choice but to sell her house. And guess who bought it? Me. Margaret tried to fight it. She stalled, argued, even attempted to appeal the vote. But there was no way out. The neighbors she had bullied, the community she had controlled with an iron fist, all turned their backs on her. So, on a bright Saturday morning, I stood on my front porch, watching her pack up her life into a U-Haul. It was a surreal sight. The same woman who had gone out of her way to make my life miserable was now the one being forced out of the neighborhood she once ruled. She moved stiffly, stuffing boxes into the truck with robotic motions. No more smug attitude. No more fake smiles. Just quiet, defeated resignation. I walked over and stopped a few feet away. She flinched, probably expecting some kind of speech, maybe even gloating, but I didn't need to rub it in. Her downfall spoke for itself. Still, I wasn't going to let her leave without a final word. I tilted my head, watching her fumble with the particularly heavy box. "Next time, maybe don't assume you know who you're messing with." She didn't respond, didn't look at me, just lowered her head and kept loading. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the U-Haul's doors slammed shut. She climbed into the driver's seat, hesitated for just a moment, then started the engine. And just like that, she was gone. A sense of peace settled over the neighborhood. The same people who had been too afraid to challenge Margaret before now walked up to me, shaking my hand, thanking me for restoring order. One of the board members even approached me with an offer. "You know, Ethan," he said, clearing his throat, "with your unique position as the neighborhood's owner, would you be interested in running the HOA?" I smirked. I think I've had enough of HOA drama for a lifetime. And with that, I finally got to enjoy my home the way I was meant to, without electric fences, barrels, or ridiculous signs blocking my driveway. The neighborhood was mine now, and I made sure no one would ever forget it.